Morning. Um, so I work for 3Vision. We're a content consultancy. Our business is kind of everything around the world of content. Our clients are, easiest way to explain it, our clients are either traditional service operators, so either launching at its most basic a kind of a DTH platform, or launching VOD, or launching TV everywhere. So kind of either brand new or new services. We help them get the right content. We help them get deals on good terms. We help them find the right content and define kind of what the right offer is. Then I guess if you're being non-traditional, we also work for OTT operators, connected TV manufacturers. So anything across the world of content, really.
Good morning, I'm Jim Dennany. Concurrent has been providing solutions for video delivery and media data and advertising solutions to the pay TV industry for over 12 years now. So I came on a couple years ago, or almost a couple years ago, to lead our online media solutions business, which is really focused on CDN solutions, and that's CDN in the broad sense of the term, so public internet CDNs, as well as all the CDN activity that's going on within managed network operators' environments. We recently launched our eFactor product suite that's aimed primarily at two things. First, to help reduce the complexity of delivering to today's connected devices, and secondly, enabling technologies that enable monetization of those connected device services.
Thank you. Michael Lance is CEO at Excedo Broadband. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. So Excedo is the leading provider of app store solutions and applications for TV. So we provide apps both for the over-the-top platforms, the consumer electronics platforms, and also the managed networks platforms from the service providers in the market. We've been doing this for quite some time, and we have customers all across the globe, and including the major media companies like MTV, CNBC, Fox, ABC, NBA, and so on. We think that applications on TV will be just as important as it is on mobile devices, but of course in a different context and different user experience.
Thank you. And Frank Thorpe is owner and managing director of Extreme. Frank, good morning.
Yes, good morning. My name is Frank. Yes, I'm representing Extreme. Extreme is a streaming media service provider based in the Nordic area. We have a focus on our online video platform called MediaMaker, which is the heart within OTT services in our area, serving companies like Telenor, Comoyo, Canal Digital, and other major content providers in our area.
Thank you. So, adaptive bitrate technology has given us much better looking, much better quality video online, but it's also created very disruptive workflow experiences for people who design and deploy these networks. Andy, I want to start with you. Talk to us about how disruptive, though, the proliferation of devices that can consume this content has been to how you think about your video workflow and offerings.
Did you say me? Or
yes, Andy?
Oh.
How do you plan for all the screens? What are some of the things you have to start thinking about initially?
Well, I think our clients come to us for that kind of simplicity in the total management. And, I think I'll kind of deviate the question slightly by saying that, most of our clients are studios. These are the Paramounts, the Foxes, and a lot of the international movie studios. And you would think that for these guys that create, moving pictures and motion pictures, they would have this completely figured out on the marketing side. But the reality is that, I think most of the emphasis has been on the actual long form. When it comes to the marketing side, it's actually quite fragmented. So, Preview comes in and we provide essentially the end-to-end solution. We do the encoding for them. So I don't want to oversimplify it, but essentially, the client gives us one file, we encode it across 10 plus different formats ready for distribution. we distribute it into the network that we have built for them, which includes media outlets. It could be The Guardian, it could be MSN, it could be MTV Europe, which are all clients of ours. And then essentially we track the consumption. So I think from the workflow perspective, I think we simplify that, and it literally take it from beginning to the end. The clients don't really need to do much once they hand the content to us, and what they get back is just a reporting on how many people actually watched it and where, for how long, and the interactions in between.
So Jim, I'm going to follow up with you. Sorry, it's a little loud. How do you? So Andy said it's simple, but the customers, clients, and rights holders I talk to have said that things are more complex than ever. So with a Galaxy tablet, an iPad, Android devices, this whole universe of screens. How do you plan to reach all those devices? I mean, ultimately you'd like to reduce it down to just a couple of different flavors, but I mean, how do you guys approach that?
So we try to solve the problem for our customers and their customers, so we don't have the workflow ourselves, but when I introduced myself, I talked about reducing that complexity of today's connected devices, and our focus right now is on the adaptive bitrate formats. So there's 3 leading formats in the market right now. There's another one more standards-based that's on the horizon, and probably more. But there's commonality in them, and I know I think we've got a question coming up about the codecs and leveraging those codecs, but simply we think the right solution is to create one copy of the asset, multiple bit rates, but one copy of the asset, and then on the fly repackage that, or as we call it, transmux that content into the different adaptive bitrate formats. So it simplifies that workflow by just creating the one asset, and this can be done for live and on demand, but it's the transmuxing or on-the-fly repackaging that we think really helps with this.
Thanks. Einar, over to you in the digital home and the OTT side of the business. Is it any more complex? Is it any easier? Because you're dealing with maybe a more static universe of set-top boxes or devices that are consuming the content. Is it any easier?
Well, to be honest, I think it's quite complex. I hear that everyone providing a solution for this, they say that, like you said, Jen, we do encoding in 10 different profiles. It should have been necessary to do that. We are using smooth streaming, adaptive streaming, and we want to deliver a good user experience for our customers. But then there are boxes and devices, connected TVs, and handsets not supporting that smooth streaming, and then we have to re-encode and transmux everything. So, to be honest, I think it's quite complex.
So I'll follow up then. So what can the audience take away from that? Is there a way to simplify it, or is it just a matter of having to deal with all these different flavors of content, flavors of technology, so that they can consume the content? What are the takeaways?
Well, we saw adaptive streaming for the first time. I think it was maybe 3 years ago. Now it's 5 standards, very similar to each other, but so different. So everyone's supporting different kind of DRM, a different formats and protocol. So I hope that we see some kind of standardization in the future. I do.
Thank you. Frank, I'll move down to you. So let's talk about mobility. When you help your customers design these workflows, aside from the largest platforms, Android and iOS, Symbiont's still pretty large over here in Europe, how are you helping them target devices, and what do you focus on?
I think the focus from our side is to create some environments which are actually fitted into the platforms that our customers want to be on, more than focusing on the codecs encoding part of it, because the encoding part of it is something that we can fix. The most important thing is to create compelling environments which are actually fitted into the device that the customers need to go to market with. So so we very much focus on the platforms that we want to serve our clients on in terms of usability and fitting in the content flow into the platform, more than we focus on the codecs, because that is something that today for us is something that is naturally challenging, but we will cope with that.
So a few of you have touched on this, and it's kind of an emerging trend, so forgive me if I go a little off reservation and things we haven't talked about in our prep for the panel, but and I'll throw this out to the entire panel. What about MPEG Dash? Does anyone think that will help solve some of these problems and some of these complexities? I mean, the standard will be ratified next month, and I've heard interest from cable and telco operators and also on the delivery side. So there's enough interest there, but I'm not sure there's enough ubiquity there. Anyone have any thoughts on MPEG Dash and how that might help simplify the problem? So, and for reference, MPEG Dash is an attempt to standardize on deliver via HTTP.
I'll take a shot.
Sure.
I think it's actually going to probably, at least in the short term, add to the confusion because it's another format. It is standards driven. I get varying levels of interest from customers. I seem to have a little bit more interest in Europe than I do in the States for that format. I think you've always you've got the situation of the iDevice, and as long as that's there, you're going to have to support HLS, and I don't know that Apple's going to run to MPEG Dash anytime soon. So I think it's another one of these formats. As long as the codecs are consistent, and I believe they are, then I think you can handle it with a repackaging kind of approach.
So do you think that we're trying that as an industry, as a group of people around MPEG Dash, we're trying to solve a problem, but at the end of the day, we're just creating another rendition that we all have to support in terms of vendors, suppliers, rights holders?
Yeah, I think it's the right approach, but I think you've got the power of industry heavyweights that's going to make it a longer time frame for it to become the standard. And as long as there's not a single standard, then you've got this situation.
Michael, follow-up?
Yes, I don't know about this specific technology. I just wanted to make a reflection. So I personally, I don't believe in standardization. I think that's a mirage. I think we will definitely have, over the next, foreseeable future, there will be multiple standards, multiple solutions in the market, which is ultimately good, because that's a sign that innovation is working. If technology is improving and things are changing, there will always be new companies figuring out new technologies that will improve the existing technologies. And voila, we have fragmentation in the market. So I think this is something and my recommendations to everyone is create processes to deal with fragmentation, because you will have to live with it for the next, the foreseeable future.
So Jim and Frank, you both touched on this a little bit. Let's delve into the technology side of it just a little bit. I don't want to have anyone's eyes roll back in their head, but has the commonality in payload in H.264 and AAC amongst the three major formats made things any easier? And I'm reminded of a question I was asked years ago. I had an engineer at Yahoo ask me, Matt, what's the universal codec, right? And you couldn't help but laugh, right? I mean, it's a great idea and concept, but even though we have some commonality amongst these payloads, can we leverage this at all? And Jim, you touched on transmuxing, which is a new approach at solving problems with technology. But so with H.264 and AAC, common amongst these three major technologies, has it made things any easier? Frank, Jim?
Was it for me?
Sure.
I don't know if that's make it easier. I would say that as Michael just said, there will be it will be a very fragmented market, and with a lot of codecs, and we will have to deal with all the codecs in the market, and so yeah, that's it.
More complex. Anyone else?
Sure, I'll go again. This is actually, what our eFactor solution was built, why it was built. So I feel like I'm repeating myself a little bit, but that commonality of those codecs does make it easier, in our view, with a technology that will repackage it. Repackaging or transmuxing is really just opening up the container and extracting those codecs and the metadata that's inside the container and repackaging it into the different containers that are used for adaptive bitrate streaming, and then of course chunking it or fragmenting it for delivery to the clients. Because of that, you're not decoding the video or the audio, you're just repackaging it, and that is something that can be done very efficiently in software. And so we've done that. I know there's other industry players. I know that NVIDIA's got a similar type of product as well, that do this in software and can do it very efficiently. So if you do have that single source asset, you can use that to deliver to all the formats and put this packaging out in the network where it makes most sense for your network, or for your network, for your CDN. So that commonality and the fact that all the players support a common codec, or H.264 and AAC, or oftentimes MP3 audio, you can do this type of solution, and it does, I believe, strongly simplify the workflow.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's very good feedback, and I can't help but wonder if 6, 12, 18 months from now, if WebM ever takes off, or if we get something new that adds complexity to that. To Jack's point, or to Dim's point rather, your transmuxing benefits of scale go away when you have to introduce a new codec to the mix, right? So it makes things a little more complex. All right, let's jump out of the technology trough for a minute, and Jack, over to you. Talk to me about what you go and discuss with your customers that you consult when they look at these new screens. So you've got tablets that are springing up everywhere. We've got some that are prevalent, that are more common than others. But if I'm a rights holder, what do I have to think about with these additional screens? How do I reach them? What's the strategy? How do I make money off of it?
I guess it's great to sit here and hear the technologists talk about complexity, because if you think it's complex, you should sit in the room with the content owners and the service providers. I think the challenge, really simply put, the challenge that our clients face, whether they're content owners delivering kind of even direct to consumer or to their service platforms, or service platforms themselves, is they want to, I guess, maximize their reach and minimize their effort. So at the moment, that means for a lot of them picking the low-hanging fruit. So let's launch something for the iPad, the iPhone, let's launch for this. And they're going through these issues, that they're developing their business cases and they're launching these services, but kind of it doesn't make it easy then for them to market and sell these services, because everything comes with a caveat. You can't tell the customer that they can watch the content everywhere on any device, because if they have an Android, they can't watch it, or if they have an iPad, they can't take it out of the home. I know that the studios and the content owners are praying for want of a better word, and certainly not a technological word, this market to normalize and for it to become simpler, because it will make their life a lot easier, and they can start taking these propositions that all of us see. You see great marketing and great pushing of if you're in the UK, you see Sky Go. If you're in the States, you see all the different services from Comcast, Optimum, Fios, talking about kind of taking it on any screen, anywhere, but actually genuinely meaning it and not breeding problems with consumers who are ultimately being let down.
So a follow-up there, and again, because you on both sides of the pond, you're talking to customers. Are we going to see different models for tablets and mobility, I guess is the right term, here in Europe versus in the States? I mean, it seems like in the States it's something that's going to be bundled with an access package where if you're a Fios customer, you'll be able to watch those live linear channels on your tablet. Is it different here, or is it the same?
I think we see variations market by market. There's lots of different market conditions that will determine what the platforms do. I mean, ultimately, I think I see more of a shift towards the services being made available. I guess free at the point of access is the way I'd like to put it. But obviously, there's often a product association in there with your provider that's required. So I see there will be markets where they'll be charging a premium for it, but I see more and more kind of the added value play for the traditional players kind of holding on to their market and staking out a position as kind of various threats come in from OTT providers. But it will vary. I think one of the complications on top of all of the technology is some of the App Store terms and condition issues as well. So there's not just technological issues and rights issues, there's kind of commercial issues around there as well.
So
I just want to
Sure.
make a general comment. I think it's important to note that I think fragmentation is kind of old. I think everybody is talking about fragmentation, and people have been for many years. I think what might be interesting to remember is that how much opportunity that this fragmentation is creating. And personally speaking, I joined the company from the venture capital side because our company is a VC-backed company. And if you look at the way, and Michael mentioned this earlier about the innovation, when you have fragmentation and competition, that usually increases innovation. And if you look at the amount of venture capital funding that has gone into video-related companies, Q1 this year, it's been over $477 million pumped into video-related companies on the VC side, just VCs, not even private equity. And then if you go back to Q4 last year, it's only 180. Q3 last year, it's 150. So it went from 150, 180 to all of a sudden 477. And I haven't got the latest figures for Q2 or Q3, but I think one thing that's pretty clear is that there's a huge amount of interest in video. And my personal belief is that it's because video, out of all the, let's say, the new media elements that we have today, whether it's location-based or social or even search to a certain degree, is that video is the only link between the old media and the new media. So as it carries a lot of legacy and a lot of weight and also baggage with it. So the fragmentation is not just addressing these new issues, but it's partially dealing with the legacy of what has been done in the last 4 or 5 decades on the TV side. And but what that means is that this fragmentation, my point is that it's creating a lot of opportunities for investment, consolidations, M&A activities, and definitely I think from our perspective we're forecasting a lot of transactions that's going to take place in 2012 and 2013.
So Andy, a follow-up question for you. You talked about feature-length content earlier. So as an anecdote, last couple of shows I've done with, I've heard people from the MSO side of the house talk about the first screen being the living room. Now, I for one disagree, because if you talk to any 20-year-old today, the first screen is their tablet. It's an iPad. But talk to us about the models that you see for how people are going to consume content on these mobile devices, on tablets, and how it's monetized. Is it subscription-based? Is it title-based? What do you think is going to happen in the next year?
Well, I think this is partially a philosophical discussion, but I think my personal view on this is that I personally believe subscription fee is probably more sustainable than one-off. But that's just that's my personal view. But I think when it comes to I think we all know location is not is not, let's say location is probably more important than, let's say, being in the living room in a fixed place versus mobility. Sorry, let me rephrase. Being able to actually access the content on any devices, and people have been talking about this for quite a few years. And I think we're now finally seeing that this is becoming the reality. I think from, let's say, both preview networks and also representing kind of, let's say, maybe more on the VC side, is that it's the disruption is really, at the end of the day, you follow where the audience is, because the audience is the money. The eyeballs count for something. Eyeballs, advertisers pay for eyeballs, essentially. So if you look at where and how people are migrating, how they're using these devices and accessing content, is also largely due to the infrastructure of the region. It's also partially cultural as well, and we see different things in Europe and US and Latin America versus Asia. So I think it might sound obviously simple, but I think we like to focus and say you go where the money is and focus on where the opportunities are to make money.
Michael, over to you. Talk to us about how people consume content on these different screens. So obviously the lean back experience in the living room is different than someone leaning forward and using a tablet, and even different than maybe someone with a 4-inch screen on an Android or iPhone. What do the trends look like there? What's your experience been with how that media is being consumed on different screens?
You're definitely right that the user experience is totally different, and I think for consumers it's always about, I think everyone in this room has know the words lean back and lean forward, and I think as soon as you have sort of a mouse in your hand, you have a different understanding of the device. You have a different expectation of what you're getting. I think personally that the TV experience, the lean back sort of living room experience with a big screen, is something that is very attractive for most consumers. It sort of emulates the campfire. Sort of you sit around and consume stories together with friends and family, and I think some of the content, or most of the content that has been created today has been created for that experience. That doesn't mean that there aren't content, there won't be content out there that is more suitable for other screens, and that doesn't mean that some consumers won't consume the majority of their personal content on other devices. But I think that will be, in terms of hours consumed, that will be over the next 10-15 years, that will be very tiny. But of course, in terms of people catching up with the latest show on not the Tube in London, because the mobile networks don't work there, but on trains and so on, to catch up with the latest content that they missed the day before. That will definitely happen, but I think in terms of the mass volumes of content consumed will still happen in the living room environment, the big screen consumption.
Einar, over to you. What's maybe a follow-up? What's your experience been with that? How is the consumption model vary by the size of the screen?
Well, I think the most important is that the product is easy to find, easy to use. What we see, we just launched, so we just launched on PC and on computers. And when we launched, we got feedback from all customers. Why isn't this service available on Android, on iPad, on my iPhone? So the consumers, they are expecting more from us, from a video-on-demand store today than they did just 2 years ago.
I'm reminded of a story that I heard a couple weeks ago at a show where, for those of you familiar with HBO Go, the consumption models on that service are just skyrocketing. They're driving people from a broadcast and then saying that the next episode of that particular show is available immediately on the HBO Go application. Their usage patterns have been just very dramatic. So Jack, back to you for a strategy question. Will we see the rise of a non-broadcaster who finds success in offering something in a tablet or in a mobile experience without having that broadcast presence?
Great question. I was at MIPCOM last week, which is the big kind of TV market every year, and people couldn't stop talking about Netflix to the point that it got really boring. I mean, Netflix is a bit of an aberration because of the way they've grown and the way they've got to where they are now, but I guess kind of they're the biggest one that answers sort of your question. The capabilities of and to be really clear, of kind of non-integrated with other major content organizations, i.e. kind of not Hulu. The capability for companies that kind of are independent to break into kind of the OTT video market and to carve out a big space is pretty low in my mind. You could have knocked them for quite a few years, but old media has done a pretty good job at moving into the new media space. And if you talk to some of the kind of very large commercial content organizations in Europe, they're putting up walls right now that have got pretty rude signs on it to Netflix. And they don't want Netflix coming into their market. And the possibility for other operators to do that are pretty limited. There will always be opportunities for people with products that have kind of carved out the right market and the right segment. So don't get me wrong, there will be a lot of people out there kind of taking opportunities. But in terms of the kind of the major players, they're certainly not written off, and I think it's going to be a real challenge for new companies to carve out a big space.
Thank you. So Frank, down to you. What do you think about the new models where we're enabling live linear channels to be offered on all these different screens, and the ability to provide the broadcaster with new ad revenue, so ad insertion? How important is that today, and you know, what are your customers thinking about that?
I think it depends, of course, on the client. But as Einar just said, the consumers expect much more today than they used to. And for larger content providers, it's very important that they are represented on all platforms in order for them to keep the clients. So I think today it's very important that you have a strategy for all the platforms. And of course, it will vary from customer to customer, because for a company like Telenor, which is a larger telco, you want to create added value services to keep your clients benefiting from it, in order for them also to attract more telco service business. So it depends. It depends on the business case that the client has. But it certainly is important for the clients today.
Okay. So if we have product managers in the audience, we may not, we don't know. But from these different major technology providers that we've talked about earlier, and there's one thing that you could tell them that needs to be fixed, or whether it's something that's broken or something that's a new feature in their technology, people from Adobe or Apple or Microsoft, what would you tell them? Jim?
I actually asked my engineering team about this before the panel. So interestingly, one of the points of feedback was thank you for standardizing on the codecs. So that has enabled companies like us to make solutions like we have. The one area that I've had feedback on that's been more challenging is the documentation on these adaptive bitrate formats, player support, and just kind of figuring out the black art of working and delivering the highest quality user experience to those clients.
Michael, or Frank, any ideas there?
Well, I could at least add a comment from the sort of application platform perspective, and that is so whenever you deploy a content solution, a content application, you need to get the UI working, the application itself, and you need to get the content playing as well, which is the codec part, and we're more specialized in the user experience, the application itself. And my main feedback to every product manager is that get the stuff working rather than adding new features. That's the core thing, because there are so many platforms out there, and there are strange defects and bugs in the platforms that you normally shouldn't have. So I think there is a lot of focus on getting new features to the market rather than sorting out the existing ones.
Okay. Any other thoughts there, anyone? Okay. So tough one, but I'll throw it out to the panel. what is the one most difficult thing that we face as an industry and with our customers in helping them to reach these screens? Is it the complexity of the workflow? I mean, what's the one takeaway? You know, the toughest problem that we have, and what's the potential solution?
I'll take a stab at it.
It's pretty open-ended, but
I'll caveat it by saying that I think maybe our business ecosystem is slightly different than everyone else's here, because we deal primarily with brands, or let's say companies that with the consumer face. So we deal with the guys like Georg Jensen, or the Paramount Pictures, like I mentioned before. I think our complexity is primarily, it's less about it's not just the workflow, but it's actually the businesses themselves. So from our perspective, we kind of run across digital PR, digital media and marketing, and also digital advertising, let's say the advertising solutions, but also the content management systems like Uala and Brightcove, the enterprise kind of the large players. So our complexity is that it's very, very fragmented, not just in the ecosystem, but it's actually very fragmented on the client side. So the clients actually don't know how to consolidate on their end. Therefore, they're having a hard time buying into all of our services. They will buy into one, but restrict it to only that one, because the other part is they either don't have the team in-house or they've never even focused on it. So from a self-reflecting standpoint is that we can only provide the education to the client, and to say we provide a much more complete solution, and hoping that they would get there as soon as possible. So.
Anyone else?
Just from my point of view, I guess a lot of the complexity you're talking about, I sort of put in another box, and sort of it gets outsourced and solved by greater people. So from my point of view, it's normally around, it's normally about the rights holders and the associated security concerns. So on that side of it, more still remains a challenge with all of the different devices.
Will Ultraviolet help that?
There's kind of a lot of positive vibes coming out about Ultraviolet. Obviously, some of the studios very much supportive of it, but it's hard to say. I'm probably not the best place, but I think it looks like a lot of them are feel very confident about that.
I agree with you. I think that's a big challenge. It reminds me of something I just read recently, and I'm forgetting the gentleman's name, but he's the head of Fox Filmed Entertainment. He was relating a story that Steve Jobs had, a conversation that the two of them had, and he said, do me a favor, figure out a way to let your consumers consume your content. He said, don't let what happened to the music industry happen to the film industry. And it's one person's perspective, but I agree with you, Jack, and that I think protecting the content and rights management is the biggest challenge that we face in terms of getting content to people on any screen anywhere, at least feature-length content. Right, live linear television might be a little different. Anyone else?
Sure, I'll just add to Jack's point, which is I think the biggest challenge is the how do you make money on these devices and these screens. It still hasn't really been solved yet. In North America, for example, 95% of the revenue from the big content owners and network providers is still through some sort of pay TV service to the television. Which means the investment is more measured and slower in some cases, and it's a cost center to reach these other devices. So the quicker that we can solve these methods of monetization, and it is content protection. Content protection is just as fragmented as these delivery formats. There's 5 different leading DRM technologies at least. Ultraviolet. Maybe confuses, maybe helps with that. And then there's the models that we talked about before. Is it a subscription model, a pay-per-view model? Is it a pay model, or is it an advertising-based model? I think really for wide proliferation and growth of revenue, it's got to be an advertising model, but it's got to be an advertising model that works across these different devices and formats. And but I think that to me, that's the biggest challenge, is how do people actually make money on these services?
I agree, and I'll piggyback on your point and say I think that the most critical thing that the entertainment industry has to figure out are different models through which they present this content to their customers. I think we're going to see the universe of channels shrink from 500 down to fewer because, frankly, the consumption in, for the Outdoor Living Network or, some of those middle-tier channels that people don't watch as much, it costs the operator money to have them up there. I think we're going to see models to where those are consumed via IP or online, and I think we're going to see the advent of the ability to buy a block of programming. So you've heard that this ABC show Modern Family is all the rage, and you want to watch a 3-hour block of content, you'll be able to buy that directly through them and pay a tariff to the service provider because they've strung the cable or fiber to your home. I'd be horrible in predicting a date, but I think that's probably one of the next types of consumption models. But again, I think it frightens the service providers to think about that type of thing. But I think that's what's needed. We needed a different disruptive model to let people watch content in different ways, different price points. So with that, I'll turn it over for questions. If the audience has any questions of our distinguished panel, I'm happy to try to let them answer them. Anyone with questions? Going once? Going twice? Well, thank you for coming, and please help me thank this panel. We've had some great information here. Hopefully it's been helpful for you, and hope you have a great show.